sometimes people go, well, what should I start with? Figuring out the problem or figuring out my data? And I go, well, what does CPMAI say? It says figure out the problem. Why? Because if you don't know what problem you're solving, you don't know what data you need. And then you don't know what your return on investment is going to be. And you don't know you don't know all of the downstream effects. So really start with business understanding, figuring out what problem you're trying to solve.
Hi, this is your PM Cowboy coming back to you with another podcast on AI. I don't know if you guys are getting sick and tired of this. We've had some interesting guests on. This is going to be the fourth podcast we're doing on AI in series because it's a hot topic. And I thought we're going to kind of close it out and go back to other topics then after this. But I wanted to get somebody on board who is an advocate for AI and can give us the good news on, yes, AI is here to stay. And there's help out there for all of you viewers out there saying, you know what, I'm being bombarded with AI. I need help. Where can I go? Where can I get structure? Where can I get a source of assistance? And one of the organizations I always love to turn to, whether it be for project management, program management, portfolio management, PMOs, there's a huge initiative. Sustainability, right, is PMI. And to my great amazement and thrill, PMI has come on board fully with AI. And we have the pleasure of having Kathleen Walch on board. Kathleen, is your title product owner? You have, like, I'm sure some big, important, fancy title. What is it exactly with PMI?
So it's Director of AI Engagement and Community at PMI.
That was much better. I would have when I originally reached out to PMI, I said, who's your product owner, right? Kind of using agile language there.
Yes.
We've got Kathleen Walch on board, and we're going to let her introduce herself here in just a moment. Kathleen, this is a tradition on the PM Cowboy podcast. We always want our guests to introduce themselves, kind of, hear a little bit about your background. I think it's really important when you listen to a podcast, you want to kind of get a feeling, where's this person come from? What's their background? How do they get from point A to point B? Because I think it shapes all of us. And I think it's valuable also for people to know, hey, this person's legit and she's got lots of important things to say. So without further ado, welcome on board, Kathleen. Tell us a little bit about your background and what we call the passion journey.
Sure. So as you mentioned, I'm Kathleen Walch. I'm the Director of AI Engagement and Community at PMI. I came to PMI from the Cognilytica acquisition back in September of 2024. So for folks that have been following PMI for a while, I'm sure that you saw that announcement. Cognilytica was a company that I had co-founded with my business partner at the time, and we started back in 2017. So I've been, in the AI space now for just about a decade.
9 years already.
I know.
Wow.
I know. It's crazy. And my podcast just celebrated its 10-year anniversary. We're going into the 10th season.
Yeah, let's say that right up front to the viewers.
Okay.
Here's the junior as far as podcasts is concerned, inviting the senior. I'm totally honored that how many podcasts have you already done so far? 500?
Yeah, over 500, about 540.
Yeah, so that's one zero more than we're even close to. So thank you so much for honoring us and coming on board and giving us a little boost here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I love podcasts, right? Like I said, season 10 just kicked off for me, which is crazy that it's been a decade. When I say that out loud, it makes me feel old. So with the acquisition came the AI Today podcast, like I said, that has been around, coming on season 10. And then also the CPMAI methodology, which is a certification. It's the CPMAI certification at PMI, which I'm really excited to share is our fastest growing certification.
I've signed up. I'm going through the course. I'll eventually take the certification as well. So.
Okay, well, great. You'll be in good company. Like I said, it's the fastest growing certification at PMI, third in revenue only behind PMP and CAPM. So it's been a really wild, kind of very hockey stick growth experience since it's joined PMI. So that's a little bit about my background. Like I said, Cognilytica started off as a research an advisory firm back in 2017 covering the AI space. It came about because before that, me and Ron, who was my business partner at Cognilytica, were working at Tech Breakfast. He had started Tech Breakfast and I joined in 2014. And around 2016, we started to see voice assistants really picking off, right? And taking off. And we started to see more demos around that, more excitement, more discussions. And we said, there's something here. And he had been in the analyst business before and wanted to get back into it. So we both jumped in, started Cognilytica, and it's been a wild ride ever since. We were focused on AI, right? And so we had the AI Today podcast because we said we want to see what's going on in the world of AI today, not kind of, historically backward looking or really futuristic kind of with science fiction and what could be possible. We said, what's here and now? A lot has changed, as you can imagine, in a decade. But then there's some fundamentals that have stayed the same, right? AI is fundamentally a data issue. We still got a lot of data issues.
You still need IT engineers. You still need to have a concept of what you're doing.
Exactly.
You can't just vibe code. Well, you can vibe code, but it'll have consequences that you don't know how to measure otherwise, right?
And that's why I think CPM AI is so incredibly important. So it's a methodology for running and managing AI projects. And it's 6 phases, right? So it starts with business understanding, figuring out the problem you're trying to solve, then data understanding. What data do you need?
Can I jump right in there? Because I kind of represent the slower viewers. I always say my function is to be the super DAO. Are you familiar with the acronym DAO?
No.
Dumbest assumed user.
Okay.
It's an old IT term. So I'm always proud to ask the simple questions. So you were leading right into it, but I don't want our listeners to miss this, because when I first looked at the certification that PMI was offering, I'm like, okay, what is it exactly? Are they going to teach us how to prompt? Is it an AI how to? And it's much more than that. And I actually think your approach is sensational. So maybe we can rewind just a little bit and maybe lead us into what is CPM AI and what's its kind of vision and mission, and then we can kind of go into those segments.
Yeah, sure. I guess I'll start with its origin story, why it was even developed to begin with. So as I had mentioned, Cognilytica was an analyst firm, and we would have customers, right, who wanted to know about the space. And we said, okay. And then they go, this is back in 2018, right? They wanted to run an AI project. And we said, there clearly must be a methodology out there that you can follow. And so we did a lot of research, and there was nothing. So there was CRISP-DM, which was around data mining, and that was developed in 1999. But then stalled on version 1, right? And it was really around data mining, so it wasn't AI specific. And Agile, right? As we know, the Agile Manifesto wasn't published until 2001, so it wasn't agile and iterative. So we took some elements of that because it had great data foundations, and then we added in agile elements, right? Because these should be done in short iterative sprints, and added that agile mindset. And that's where CPM AI was developed. So that all the way back in 2018, so we were able to help folks on that journey. The methodology and the certification itself, right, is to help you run and manage AI projects. It never has and never will be about teaching you how to use AI tools. Why? Because tools change so often. I mean, could you imagine we'd have to be updating this almost daily? So we were like, that's not the right approach. And also, when I think about skill sets, I break them down, right? Because everybody says that we should be learning AI and doing things, but I break them down into 3 different types of learning. And so you have your perishable, durable, and enduring skills. Your perishable skills are the ones that are going to be quick to learn, but quick to decay. So that's on how to use AI tools, right? You think about when a new model comes out, you need to make sure that you're understanding how to do that. We've moved from prompt engineering, right, to context engineering, building agents. What does this look like? Those are going to be those perishable skills. Then we have durable skills. And so this is around frameworks and methodologies like CPM AI, where it's going to take you a little bit longer to learn, but then you're going to be able to use those skills for a lot longer. So if we think about, right, where a lot of people now are saying, well, we're not running and managing an AI project. But I go, yes, you are. Right? Where they go, well, we're not building the models from scratch. And I go, okay, that's fair. We're probably not building models from scratch, but you know what we are building? Agents. And if we have agentic workflows, you need to follow CPM AI. So that's where the methodology continues to be super relevant. And then we have these enduring skills. And so this is really around those soft skills or power skills that PMI calls them. And this is critical thinking, collaboration, communication, judgment. These are going to take a lot longer to learn, but then be very transferable throughout your entire career. And so when I think about learning, I like to think about it from those three angles. We'll never teach really those perishable skills in CPMAI. It's going to be more of those durable skills. And then some enduring, but also there's a lot of resources out there to help with thinking about and teaching and reinforcing your durable skills.
Well, I think where I smiled, because I've been affiliated with PMI and similar organizations for a long time, and I'm totally indoctrinated in the framework concept of things. You know, I always look at, as an organization, when you're trying to really transform something, you've got the strategic level. Everybody's great at that. Everybody's great at creating vision and mission, right? Then you have that functional level where you have all that nitty gritty that most people don't want to focus on. Then you have the operational, and that framework sits right in the middle, and actually it combines all three. And I think that's where there was a great marriage between the operational assets that PMI brings to the table, you know, having decades and decades of experience of taking complex situations and simplifying it by putting it down into layers and into steps, and also reminding people that, you know what, you know, this whole think fast, think slow kind of principle. We should know what we're at least to a certain extent, know what we're doing before we move forward. Yeah, great. So, what are these AI patterns? Because I kind of put through a checklist of things that you are responsible. You're responsible for the CPM AI. By the way, for you listeners out there, go on to the PMI website. There are wonderful artifacts on there. Lots of handbooks, lots of standards, lots of practice guides. It almost, and this is not a critique, it's just a comment, because there's such a wealth of information on there. It's almost overwhelming. It takes you a little bit of time. Okay, when the standard just came out, and I've got the work practice thing, and I've got the workbook that's filled out and not filled out, and I've got a course, and there's so many AI courses. Really, hats off to you and to PMI. You guys are really burning the candle at all ends. But maybe give our viewers a little bit of an overview of what else you have besides the CPMAI, and you've got the AI standards, the 7 AI patterns, the Infinity, and the new standard that's come out. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. I think it would be helpful for listeners, if they're not familiar maybe with how PMI is structured, is we have 8 content and innovation platforms. And so I know that you've mentioned a few of them in your introduction, and I know that you've had some of we call them CIP, content and innovation platform leaders on. So Lucila, who's for sustainability.
Had her on the podcast, yeah.
Yep. And Americo, who's for PMI.
Loved having him on as well.
Yeah, both of them are really incredible. And then I lead AI. I lead our AI CIP. So when I think about what AI offers, I think about our portfolio. And so we have many things in our portfolio. We have our thought leadership content that comes out from the thought leadership team. We have our methodology and our certification, right, which is PMI, CPMAI. And so within that, you had talked about the workbook. So one of the assets that we give as part of CPMAI is a workbook that you can fill out so that as you're going through each phase of your project, you have it documented. Yes, I know some people think it's over documentation. They don't like it, but then other people really love it because it helps them make sure that they're answering questions that they should in the correct order and that it's documented. So if somebody new comes onto the project, they have that documentation, or if somebody leaves, that knowledge doesn't leave with them in their head. So that workbook has been an incredible asset. We have both a filled-in workbook and a blank workbook. The reason that we have the filled-in workbook was that folks who were going through the learning course, we were asking them to fill out the workbook either with one of the examples that we provide as we walk through the learning journey so that we show you how it's done, or an example that they have in real life. People wanted to know how to fill out the workbook. So we said, you know what? That's a great idea. We'll put in a filled in example. So we walk through it in one of the
which was a great idea, by the way. People won't admit it, but they want to see an example.
Oh, yeah. Well,
until it
actually,
drops
folks
in their
did
head.
admit
Yeah.
it, which was great. And that's why we did it. We said, yes, like we love to iterate, right? Think big, start small, iterate often is CPMAI's motto. And that's exactly what we live by. So that's the certification. Then we have and so within that, you would mention the 7 patterns of AI. The 7 patterns of AI is a core part of CPMAI. In addition to that, we have e-learning courses that come out from our learning team. We have 7 out right now. Some are free for everybody, whether or not you're a PMI member, and some are free just for members. There's a small fee for non-members. One of those courses is digging deeper into the 7 patterns, where we talk about it and frame it from a different lens than we do in CPMAI to make sure that if you want to sit through it, you're still getting learning from a different lens, but it's the core 7 patterns. What are the 7 patterns and why were they developed, right? They were developed back in 2019. They were developed because AI is an umbrella term. And so when I'm thinking about AI, I may be thinking about AI-enabled chatbots. Someone else is thinking about an autonomous vehicle. Someone else is thinking about a predictive maintenance system. And they all fall under that umbrella of AI, but they are not all the same. So the data that you need is different. The amount of data you need is different. If you are building this from scratch, the algorithms that you use will be different. Your return, your time to see that return on investment is also going to be different. A chatbot is going to have a much more immediate return on investment than an autonomous vehicle, for example. Why? It just takes a lot longer to put out, right? So you have to understand that. So he said, let's break it down one level deeper and say, what is it that we're trying to do? This also helps folks understand if AI is the right solution to their problem. So the 7 patterns for folks that take the learning, the CPMAI training and certification, they will see that that falls in the first phase of CPMAI, which is business understanding, figuring out what problem you're trying to solve. We thought it was important that we would also bring it into the learning course so that we can start letting people know that, because PMI has done a great job at providing foundations, but this year we've been focused on expanding beyond the foundations. And so to provide higher level content. And that was what the 7 patterns was to help do, to say AI isn't just generative AI. There's a lot more to it. So let's introduce the 7 patterns. And then the 8th course that we have, which I'm excited will come out towards the end of the year, is on agents and agentic AI, because that's also
I'm excited about that one because I'm getting a lot of mixed messages from.
Yeah, so I'm really excited for that course. So stay tuned for that to come out towards the end of the year. So that is from the learning side of things. Then we also have the AI Today podcast, which is an incredible asset. Obviously, I love it. I love podcasting. Like I said, it's coming up on season 10. We've gone through many different podcast series. Some of the podcasts have talked about the 7 patterns, and we dig deep into each one. We had for many months, actually, an AI use case series. So we talked about how AI
I think it's hugely important.
Exactly, right? In different industries. And then as you listen to it, you go, oh, maybe I'm not in manufacturing, but I see a lot of parallels between the way that manufacturing does things and the way that I'm doing things as a logistics company, where maybe you wouldn't have seen those parallels before. And then I've also now been interviewing folks who are CPMAI certified. I've had, for the last number of episodes, probably the last maybe 10 or dozen, I've been interviewing folks. Why? Because I want folks to understand how CPMAI is being used in the real world, why they got the certification, how it's helped change their approach and their thinking towards AI projects, and how they're applying it in the real world and the benefits that they've seen. So those have been some really wonderful podcasts. Then in addition to that, we have Infinity, which is a member benefit. It is our AI tool to help project managers with our body of knowledge, right? So it's not supposed to be a general purpose LLM where it's in replacement of a Claude or a ChatGPT or, a Copilot, but it is supposed to be a companion to that it helps them do their job better as a project professional. And so that is, and then of course we have our AI standard that you had mentioned. And so that came out recently.
Brand
So we have
new.
It is brand spanking new. It is the only ANSI accredited AI standard on the market. We are super excited about that. We have a bunch of webinars coming up to discuss the topic further. I'm sure you've seen it on LinkedIn if anybody's
I've seen it. Very good.
Yeah.
So there's a couple things you said. I want to ask some follow-up questions on the use case issue. I think the use case issue is a hot topic. because I think a lot of people are still struggling to look for those use cases. Besides your podcast, is PMI offering some kind of repository where people can find a variety of use cases, or is your podcast the main vehicle to transport those?
The podcast is the main vehicle for use cases. They can also go to projectmanagement.com, right? We have a large community as well, so that you can understand, because that's user generated and community generated content, which to us is so incredibly important, because that gives them the voice to showcase how they're doing it as well. And then the other thing that we have is we've started an AI ambassadors group. So right now we're in a pilot phase. We've moved to phase 2 of the pilot, so we're expanding it a little. In right now 4 regions, moving to 5. PMI has 8 regions globally. Yeah, and so those are folks from the community who are certified, who are really passionate about all of the offerings that PMI has, so that they can help be an additional voice. So to the extent that they talk about their use cases, how they're using AI, how they're applying it in their daily work. And then when I think about AI too, especially when it comes to use cases, right? I think about it as 2 sides of the coin. One, how do I use AI to help me do my job better as a project professional? And so that can be, we can give them examples about, how they can use that, efficiencies they can gain, even some of the e-learning courses that we have, right? We have one on prompt engineering, and we also have another one on practical applications of AI. We have one on construction and infrastructure as well, right? So those are examples of how it's being used. Then on the other side, we have how do I run and manage AI projects? And so that's where CPM AI comes into play. Collectively, we offer everything to our audience, which is wonderful. So when I think about use cases, I always say, well, what exactly, right? Figure out what problem you're trying to solve when you'd like to know use cases. Do you want use cases to understand how to use an AI tool better? Or do you want use cases because you want to know how people have brought AI projects into their organization and you're looking to do that as well?
One of the things I like so much about the CPMAI approach is that it takes a more broader, more solid managerial approach to it and say, listen, don't just ask me to implement the next AI tool, but that's what I believe that CPMAI does for you. It provides you with, and by the way, a lot of IT managers are looking exactly for that. Bless you, are looking exactly for that. What's a framework that I can work with, right? And I actually think there's a lot of organizations out there that have the same question. As a consultant, I keep running into different companies that are implementing AI. And I keep asking what framework they're using because I'm, of course, trying to push them towards PMI. And I'm getting all sorts of different random answers. And I think all of these frameworks will have a lot of similarities between them. But uniformity is so important and so powerful when you're trying to be efficient in what you're trying to do. Let me ask you, you've kind of alluded to it already, but if I were to ask you who is the classical candidate for CPMAI certification, and what does a certificate like that say about somebody who has a certificate for those hiring out there?
Well, it's not a certificate; it's a certification, big C certification. Yeah. So when CPMAI was first developed with Cognilytica, right, which was the firm that PMI acquired, we did not have any prerequisites because we just wanted to get it out there. Like you had mentioned, when you ask an organization what methodology, framework, step-by-step approach, whatever words you want to call it, you will get random answers. And usually you will get, this was happening especially back in the day, but it still happens. You'll get either it's proprietary and we can't share, which number one, that means you're not doing anything because the framework that you follow is not proprietary. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Scientific method was one that we got a lot. And I'm like, you are not using the scientific method for your AI projects. You just are not. Or they weren't using anything. And then they would admit that. So what happens when you're not using anything is you do it in a random way and you do it not in an appropriate order. And you are lucky if it succeeds. And then try and do that again. Try and replicate that in another team. If you have no idea what you did, you can't do that. So that's the issue with not having it, right? So we said we don't want any prerequisites because AI was too new back then, and we just wanted people to adopt the methodology. We've actually continued that into PMI, where we said we have no prerequisites. That was a strategic decision that we made. And we did that because you don't maybe have experience running and managing an AI project, but you need to at your organization. So what I have found is that the ideal candidate looks different than the minimally qualified candidate, right? So the minimally qualified candidate, pretty much you just need to be 18.
Yeah.
Because you have to legally be
Have a
18.
driver's license.
You don't, no, but you have to legally be 18 to sit for our exam through Pearson. That's why you have to be 18. And you don't need a driver's license, any ID, right? I don't care if you know how to drive or not. If you take CPM AI, no big deal. Get an autonomous vehicle to drive you places, right? But what I have found is that you are usually going to be mid to senior in your career. You are going to not be a junior employee. And you are going to be tasked with running and managing an AI project. Either this is the first for your organization as we're bringing it in. Maybe there's been some pilots, but now they need to bring a project manager on board so that they're running this in, a standardized way. That's what I found is the typical candidate. Does not mean that that needs to be you in order to take this. You can be at any stage in your career, but that's where the majority of folks are. When I think about that bell curve, right? That's usually what the center of the bell curve will be.
That's very traditionally PMI, although PMI has varied in its stance in some of its certifications. One of the things that drew me to PMI over 27 years ago was the fact when I was back in the day when I was a junior project manager for a mega project, was that it was inclusive. And a lot of the more Europe-based organizations were exclusive. It was kind of what we called the old lady, old man exclusive club. And I think the approach, I would agree with you. I think the people who would lean more towards CPM AI will probably be mid to higher level in their career. But I absolutely find it refreshing and positive that you say, hey, listen, we don't draw the line there. The more the merrier. If junior people want to do it, that's great. Why should a CEO want their IT personnel or IT leaders to be a CPM AI?
So it's important that we make sure you have standard terminology, standard lexicon, and that we're all following the same approach. So when I think about, right, from a CEO standpoint, yes, IT should get this because they are going to be helping with the technical implementation. But this is also for non-IT as well. And so one thing that I've seen, sadly, more often than I'd like to admit, is that if your business team and your technology team aren't talking the same language, you're going to run into major stalls and roadblocks. And so one client that I had worked with, they were trying to get data from the technical team. And it took them 5 months because they just weren't speaking the same language and both of them were getting tripped up. Another client I talked to, it took a year. And she said that wasn't uncommon. And I think about what happens in 5 months, right? When it comes to AI, when it comes to the world, what happens in a year? I mean, you may not need to be running that project anymore. And think about all the time lost in that, right? If we're supposed to have these short iterative sprints that are taking just a few weeks at a time, but we can't get past phase 2, which is data understanding, because we can't get that data that we need, then phase 3 is data preparation. We're not even there yet. We have 6 phases before we get it out, right? What are we losing, right? What's that opportunity cost? And so when we think about what is the cost of training your employees versus failure, the cost of training is so low. And so if you think about what does it mean to train your employees, common terminology and lexicon, making sure we're all following the same step-by-step approach, making sure that we understand that at a fundamental level so that you as a project manager don't feel like you need to be teaching the team every single time you're on an AI project. That's what I would say to CEOs and why it's so important to get a team, not just an IT team, certified.
Yeah. This kind of is a segue to the second part of the podcast where I'd like to take you. I mean, it's an honor to have you on board, and I want to give you the opportunity to say all the good things that you can about PMI, because it's important to get the message out there and let people know that they're not alone. One of my favorite quotes is, "We read to know that we're not alone." One listens to podcasts or does whatever, participates in workshops or seminars for the same reason. And there's lots of good things happening out there, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. What PMI has done is sensational. And maybe a way to drive this a little bit home, I mentioned to you when I sent you some of the suggestions of questions I would ask you, I told you that the tenure or the tone of this podcast is to be what I like to call constructively critical. I'm a big fan of AI. I don't think it's a question whether it's here to stay, but I'm as a PM Cowboy, I'm the first one to say BS if I smell it. And I think there's a lot of hype out there. I think a lot of people are unsettled and confused. Should I buy in? Should I not buy in? I have a number of clients that come to me and say, Mark, these are like small to medium-sized companies, and they'll say, Mark, what's your advice? You know, they ask me during the coffee break, off the record, should we buy this? Should we do that? Should we train this? Should we commit to this LLM? Should we be doing vibe coding? Should we be working with agents? And I always come back to this. The core principles is, do you even know what you want? I call it the Spice Girl principle. Tell me what you really, really want. And the problem is, that takes some time. It takes some iteration to actually say, where does it even make sense to apply? Just like you said, what type of AI are we looking for? What would be the application? What's the cost of implementing it? Is it in line with our principles? Does it match our business model? All these questions are important. And actually, I often catch myself with some clients. Like I said, I'm a big fan of AI, but there's some clients where I said, you know what, you guys just don't have an idea of what use cases you want to use it for. And they said, yeah, but if we don't move now, aren't we going to miss out? And I said, you know what, considering your operational budget and your other priorities, this is what I've actually recommended this to some of my clients. It says, sit it out. Keep people involved. You should have a team that's committed to AI. I also tell them they should get their certification. It'll warm them up. But I said, you know what? You're not going to miss out. You don't have the dilemma that the first movers are going to win here. In fact, I think a lot of the first movers are going to burn their fingers. And I think actually second movers, once there's, valid use cases and procedures on how to get what you're actually going for, will actually reap the benefits of some of the disastrous results. And that brings me to this one famous paper that was written by MIT. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's already old. But this report that was done that said, I think that back then they said it was 500 billion. I think it's up to 700 billion or 800 billion right now that has been invested in the global market. I'm sure somebody invented that number, but it's fairly accurate, right? And then they came up with a statistic that said only 5% of those companies that have invested that substantial amount of money have reported a return of investment, okay? Now, I think one of the battle cries of PMO and project management and the new vim and vigor of project management is don't focus just on cost, but focus on value. Value-driven, value focus is important. And then, everybody's shocked when I say only 5% of 800 million claim to have a return of investment. That's a big question. I'd love to hear what you have to say to that. But I guess the conclusion would be, sorry for talking so long, I'm trying to set up the question. I think we got a lot of gaslighting feedback, like, it's because you guys don't know what the heck you're doing. And I guess there's a couple questions tied into this long-winded intro here. I would probably say that if the statement is legitimate that people are doing it wrong, I think CPM AI is exactly the way to tie in there and say, okay, do we even know what we're doing? Is there a framework? By the way, the framework's not going to guarantee success, but it should increase the probability of success. That's one thing I would say. I'd love to hear what you think about that. What's your take on this MIT, and not just MIT? There's all sorts of little short Instagrams out there where people are saying, I don't know what it's every day is Ford has reneged on its AI, Amazon has reneged on its AI, everybody's reneging on their because it's what's your take on this whole ROI viability and the fact that people are supposedly doing it wrong?
Yeah, that is a very, very intricate, long question. So I'll kind of
break it down,
yeah.
whatever comes to mind.
Yeah, that's great. So what I think about is CPMAI phase 1, business understanding, figuring out what problem you're trying to solve. And, and it always comes back to this. There's 6 phases in each iteration. Phases 1, 2, and 3 are going to be 80% of each of your iterations. Why? Because they're really critically important. Sometimes people go, well, what should I start with? Figuring out the problem or figuring out my data? And I go, well, what does CPMAI say? It says figure out the problem. Why? Because if you don't know what problem you're solving, you don't know what data you need. And then you don't know what your return on investment is going to be. And you don't know you don't know all of the downstream effects. So really start with business understanding, figuring out what problem you're trying to solve. And then controversial, AI is not always the right solution to every single problem. People want it to be, but it's not.
Thank you. That's a daring statement, and I'm proud of you for saying it, because I was suspecting that, and that's what I'm telling a lot of people, and I'm glad to hear somebody of your stature saying the same thing. Which is, by the way, not cutting down AI at all in its overall potential. It's just being honest. Depending on your situation, you need to know, does it fit into your context, yes or no?
Right. And because it's hot and shiny, right, and a buzzword, everybody wants to make AI fit their problem. So what I say is, what problem are you trying to solve? If you don't know if AI is the right solution, you look to the 7 patterns of AI, which is why it's so important we put it as its own e-learning course. So if you have not gotten certified, still take that course, right? And so, okay, so now we figure out what problem it is. I had said that autonomous vehicles, right? The autonomous pattern is a pattern of AI. The goal of that pattern is to remove the human from the loop. Obviously, that's going to be incredibly hard. Automation is not the same as autonomous. Automation is taking a task and repeating it over and over. People confuse those two terms and use them interchangeably, but they're not. So if you need automation, that's not an AI problem. That's an automation problem. Automation is incredibly important and powerful. It's just not AI. That's okay. Don't make it be AI. So I say, figure out what problem you're trying to solve. If you don't know, you look to the 7 patterns. If it fits into one or more of the 7 patterns, then you know that it's a good fit for an AI solution, right? And then now we go on, then we have an AI go, no go, which asks a series of 9 questions. We treat them like traffic lights. So if you answer yes, your chances of success are high. If you answer maybe, it's like a yellow, right? Go is green, like good, you're good to go. Yellow or amber is proceed with caution. And then red is, well, we're not telling you to not move forward, but the more reds you have, the more chance of project failure, right? So it's around data, business, and implementation feasibility. And there's, just like I said, a series of 9 questions. They're short questions, but you have to make sure you're answering them. Okay, so we've answered all of them. We're green. We're good to go. Then move forward with an AI project. Maybe in phase 1, you realize this isn't an AI project. It just may be quicker and cheaper for human labor. That's okay too, right? Maybe it's kind of a one-off project. This is why it's so incredibly important to walk through CPMAI, especially with phase 1, really be critical in there, answer these questions. And that's why the workbook helps, because it helps you answer the series of questions that you're supposed to be addressing and documenting it as well.
Yeah. So you would agree with me that that you should know what the business case is before you get yourself into the AI space.
Yeah, because otherwise, how do you even solve for it? I mean, you should know what your business case is before you move forward with anything that you're investing in, right? If you don't know what problem you're solving, if you don't know what you're trying to accomplish, if you can't measure what your KPIs will be, what your expected ROI will be, it could start being negative ROI. ROI doesn't have to be positive. When you start getting negative ROI, that's when people start going, what's going on, right? We're really behind in budget and in time for this project. And there's a ton of sunken costs into this.
I have to ask you this cliched question. It's a cliched question. You might even roll your eyes a little bit, at least subtly. But it's a question I think the viewers won't accept if I don't ask it, which is the eternal discussion around will it replace us or not? I'm sure you're familiar with that famous spider diagram that kind of shows the different functionalities and the capabilities we have. And what's your take on this? I think a lot of people, and it backfired majorly. I think a lot of companies were trying to sell us on, well, the return of investment is reducing FTEs, so resources. I think there's resounding feedback from the market that exactly the opposite is the case. You actually need senior experienced people to even be able, if you're going to vibe code, if you don't have an experienced engineer who actually really has a profound understanding of how programming is done, there's no way to verify whether or not it's what you need. So what's your take? I guess the question is it going to replace us or is it going to enhance us? What's your take on that?
So what I've always said is that AI is not a job killer, but it's a job category killer. Any transformative technology, and AI is no different, is going to do that. And that's okay. So if I think about, right, Mad Men is a show that I, really enjoy, and it's based in the 1960s, right? There was rooms full of secretaries. If you look at a workplace of today, we don't have that. We may be virtual, right? PMI is remote first. We don't even have an office like we used to. But if we are based in an office, right, we don't have rooms full of secretaries anymore. Does that mean we have mass unemployment? No, because technology has brought about new jobs that we absolutely didn't have back then, right? We didn't have mobile app developers. We didn't have social media marketers. We didn't have a lot of jobs that we have today. AI is going to do the exact same thing. And so, yes, there are certain tasks, there are certain jobs that may go away, but then there's new jobs that are going to be created as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think one of the classical questions that people love to ask is what dangers do companies face when looking at AI? And when I was writing down the question, I said, nobody's actually asking the question from the opposite side. What dangers does AI as a technology face right now based on us human beings? I actually had somebody on recently who said, the problem with AI is not AI, it's our understanding of AI and how we work with it. So let's start off. Maybe I don't know if it's a good question, but I'll ask it anyways. What dangers or what risks does AI technology or the potential of AI technology face from the way our society, our companies are built right now?
Yeah. So, the way that I look at this, and part of CPMAI is we have a trustworthy AI framework, right? And so we think about 5 layers of trustworthy AI, because at the end of the day, people need to trust what they are using. Otherwise, you spend money, time, and resources only to have people not actually invest and adopt, right? Invest in understanding, learning, adopting that technology. So we have ethical AI as the first layer, and this is right from wrong. Then we have responsible AI. Just because we can do it, should we do it? So I think about facial recognition technology, right? It's a neutral technology on its own. It's how we use it that makes people feel uncomfortable sometimes. Then we have transparent AI. And this is one of the layers I really like talking about, because this isn't transparency in the algorithm. This is transparency in how you are letting your users know you're collecting their data, how you're using it, what you're using it for. Are you interacting with an AI chatbot, right? Are you being transparent about how you are letting folks know they're engaging with different AI systems? And recently, LinkedIn just started, this was actually a while ago that LinkedIn had automatically, right, updated to now have the box clicked on so that your data that you uploaded would be used for AI training. And Google just did the same thing. Actually, it was quietly right in their terms of service update. Well, of course, people are going to click yes. Why? Because if I click no, what am I going to lose access? I don't get to do that. So now you need to manually go and opt out of letting Google use all of your different, images and searches and all of these things that you're uploading. And I think Instagram was doing this too. By default, they were allowing any user to use AI image, AI or the AI images for training or using it, whatever it is. And this is scary, right? Because this isn't about transparency. This is about that, you feel that they're trying to trick you or that they have you locked in. And so it's important to be transparent because then it allows people to feel more comfortable using your systems. Then we have governed AI. So this is around those rules and regulations and policies. And then we have explainable AI. So whenever possible, try and pick algorithms that are explainable, have root cause analysis so that you can understand how decisions were made by the different algorithms that you're using in different models.
Okay. I had a question in here. I'm going to rephrase it a little bit. It's one of my go-to statements. I guess I have a little bit of a marketing background from university. I usually been more in the operational side of things, but I'm always in tune with who speaks for what. And I think one of the biggest challenges, I think one of the biggest risks for AI is some of its spokespeople, right? And I know you don't have to say anything about these people. I'll say it, and you can say, "Oh, I didn't say it." I often say there's kind of, we used to watch Bond movies, and we used to love. They were exciting, there were lots of actions and stuff, but the plots were always ridiculous. I mean, the plot was ridiculous because you had some rich guy who was ridiculously narcissistic and pompous, and he would basically, threaten the world population. He said, well, how ridiculous is that? And now we're in a day and age where that seems to have become a little bit closer. We really have some kind of Bond villainesque type people out there who are not really doing AI a service. And I think that's one of the biggest risks we have from AI. And I think another one of the biggest risks of AI right now is that there's a huge pushback. And I think rightly slow. I think the pushback won't eliminate AI. I think it's slow it down. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the videos of the graduations this year. You had to do was start with the word A, and everybody was like booing already or walking out, which I think, by the way, power to the people. I'm with them. I don't think they're really against AI. I think they're against some of the spokespeople. And I was watching recently one of these individuals, Alex Karp. I'm sure you've caught it as well. He was recently in an interview where I was like, who's he speaking for? Is he speaking for himself? Is he speaking for his company? Is he speaking for the client? He was all over the place, as he usually is. And he was kind of talking about, and I forget the word he used because it was a bingo word that I wasn't familiar. But I guess he was talking about the ownership, the IP of data. And I think also with SaaS models, this is a big issue, right? That we're coming into a day and age where companies are trying to create this reoccurring revenue model, and I think AI is kind of buying into this model where somewhere along the line somebody's going to have to pay for it, right? And we're not paying full price right now. And Alex Karp was kind of talking about, SLMs and LLMs and all this kind of stuff. I as a DAO, and I'm going to say this really as a DAO, I like to participate in the conversation, but I'm always weary of the fact that I'm really not deeply knowledgeable, technically knowledgeable about this stuff. I'm strategically, I think, open and aware of things, and I ask some of the good, stupid questions. And one of my big, stupid questions has always been, and this also goes back to the day and age of cloud. When cloud came along, everybody said, we're buying in the cloud. And my first stupid question is, but how are you securing your data if it's on the cloud, right? And everybody said, shut up. Don't ask stupid questions. Just go with it, right? We'll find a solution. We have the same issue with AI, especially with the LLMs, that they're selling themselves as the foundational basis on which other layers can build. And my stupid question has been several times, and nobody's ever been able to agree with me or say that I was thinking in the right direction. Maybe I'm not. I would think, and I'm not going to name any names, but there's some 3-letter, 4-letter, 5-letter companies out there who really push a lot of data, who could massively benefit from AI, from bots, right? But they have a huge exposure because they're using external systems which legally have found to not be able to allow you to protect your IP, right? Where do you think that AI, this is kind of, if you were to look a little bit into the future, what has to change for some of these risks to be mitigated, or do we just have to slow down? What do companies have to do from a strategic perspective to say, listen, I have one company, man, I'm not allowed to say their name, but it's burning in my forehead, because their CEOs have committed to AI, and I think they have like 402 AI apps in their system that they're offering the external clients. But internally, it's still the Wild West. I think a lot of their employees, what are we allowed to use? And am I allowed to vibe code? And some of them vibe code, and then they even report back to management, said, listen, I vibe coded, but I think we shouldn't do this specifically anymore because it's accessing information that it shouldn't access and stuff like that. What's your take on that overall IP issue and security issue with AI?
Yeah, I mean, again, that was a really long-winded question, so I'll break it down.
I'm sorry, I'm terrible at that.
So the first part, you talked about IP, right? And then you said this is the Wild West. That's usually what I say too. And what was the Wild West, right? And what does this look like? Where it was this land and also the frontier, right? So especially in the United States, right, which I think is kind of where that came from. When we were moving westward and had westward expansion, we didn't exactly know how far we could go before we started to hit another body of water, right? And that the continent would just end. And we didn't know what we were going to encounter along the way either. We may have been able to guess and predict based on our past experiences, but we didn't quite know. And so then when we go into the Wild West, right, and the frontier, it would be some lawless land, your cowboy ethics book back there, right? What did that look like? Well, you would go and then you would establish some sort of town, right? But then it would be lawless. And then you needed to bring a sheriff in town and you're like, hey, guess what? We need to put some law and order here. We need to put guardrails. We need to put governance in place so that people feel protected. And now we can move forward. And then we do it in the next place and the next place and the next place. And then we get to the end, right? We're not at the end yet. And again, we don't know where that end is going to be. So what does this mean? It means we're learning as we're going, right? That famous phrase, we're building the plane as we're flying it. So we don't have established IP laws and regulations in place yet because we still need to figure out how that's evolving, what this means, right? What the implications are for that. And then we have appetite that's different in different parts of the world, where Europe is a little bit more regulation heavy and they like to get in front of different things. So they did that with GDPR. They did that with the EU AI Act. America is different. We're a more wait and see approach, which honestly, a lot of the world is a more wait and see approach where we say, let's see how the technology is being used and adopted. And then we're going to put laws and regulations in place to make sure that we're managing that. Neither one is right. They're just different approaches. So that's on the IP side of things. Then you talked about SLMs and LLMs. So small language models and large language models. And what's been happening? Well, I am sure that many people have been following the news for the past several weeks about Fable 5 and what that looks like, right?
Yeah.
And ChatGPT 5.6. This is starting to get political. Right now, China is saying, hey, maybe we're not going to put some of our models out for the rest of the world because of concerns around national security, which is exactly what the US said. We have concerns around national security. What do you know? Other companies and other countries are going to be doing this as well. Now this is becoming geopolitical. Well, what happens to those countries that aren't the US and that aren't China and they're kind of stuck somewhere in between? So I always say avoid vendor lock-in, right? Vendor lock-in can be a big problem. So small language models are something that you can bring into your organization. Small is a relative term. They can still be pretty large, right? Yep. But there's something that you can house. And then there's large language models, right? And frontier models. Organizations still have absolutely no idea how to manage this. because it's still being figured out, right? But at some point, there is going to be a balance of when do we use small language models? When do we use large language models? And now how do we manage that? So remember when I said it's a job killer, but not a job, it's not a job killer, but a job category killer, but new jobs are created. That is a job that is potentially going to be in the future, right? Management of models. And what does that look like? And how do you train your employees on what to use when? We're nowhere near that right now. The vast majority of people are absolutely not doing that. So that's sort of where we're falling. Organizations need to figure that out. Do they want to be locked in with one vendor? Right now, you had talked about costs, right? Eventually, at some point, we're going to have to start paying for these costs. How I like to think about this is back in the day with Uber, right? Everybody knows Uber at this point, whether or not it's allowed in your country or your city or wherever, right? Because laws and regulations needed to catch up to that. What Uber did at first is they were throwing out coupons like confetti. They're like, you want a free ride? Here you go. Here you go. Here you go. Why? Because they wanted to build up a user base, right? And so they said, let's go and build up a user base. And it's going to be a loss leader for us. No big deal. We're going to get the app on people's phone. We're going to get them bought into using our app. We're going to show them how amazing our service is. And then they're going to want to use it. And then the price became about on point with cabs and different taxi providers in different cities, and people said, okay, well, I still like the convenience of being able to call it from my phone. And now in some places it's higher, and we have surge pricing that can be astronomical.
Yeah.
But guess
nightmare
what?
stories.
People still use it.
$75,000 or something like that, more than the cost of the employee in some cases.
Yeah. I mean, that's an egregious case, but people still use it. They got locked in. What we're seeing with LLMs is that right now, I can pay $20 a month and get access for an individual account with most of these different tools. But enterprise accounts are different. Enterprise accounts are going to be usage based. Some are moving there, and some are, so like Anthropic with Claude, the enterprise account is a usage based account. Most organizations have absolutely no idea what their usage is. Why? Because they've never done it that way before, right? They were paying $20 a month. Copilot is doing the same thing, right? They brought in Copilot Cowork. Well, to get M365 Copilot, it's a flat rate per employee. To get M365 or to get the Copilot Cowork, it's a usage based. You have no idea what your usage is. Yep. If you have not ever been measured on that. And then there was that idea of token maxing for a while that I think folks moved away from because they realized that was just ridiculous. Why? Because they were being measured on the wrong measurement. So they were being measured on usage, and they said, fine, you know what? I'm going to show you that I use this, and I'm going to token max, and I'm going to just use it as much as I can. Yeah. Were they being efficient? No. Was it a good ROI? No. But they were just capitalizing on what they were being measured on. Organizations are going to have to start figuring out what that balance is. They're going to start having to figure out what the real cost of AI adoption is and what the real cost of usage is. And then we're going to start being able to.
I agree with you. I think it's going to be an iterative. I like, by the way, kudos to you. You took my analogy and really shot it out of the park. Yes, the Wild West analogy, I think, fits. And one of the things I would derive from what you're saying is just because it's the Wild West doesn't mean that what we're doing is always bad. There's opportunities to do bad. So, even without governance and without laws and without the sheriff, most people, I think, tend to want to do good. I think that's important to focus on. And just because you have governance or a sheriff doesn't mean that it's always good either. There's also, there's negative aspects of that as well. So I like that. The one question that was packed in that way too convoluted intro and question was, will companies, I guess it's too early to say, will they ever be able to develop their own internal LLMs, or is that prospect still too expensive? Well, to be able to kind of secure that IP issue, because Alex Karp was really harping on it, not to use a pun on his name. I was really harping on it, it's who's going to own the IP, I forget what the word was that he used, but who's going to basically own the content, and like there's some SaaS models out there that are basically telling their clients, your data is no longer your data, it's now our data, and you have to lease it from us, kind of what ChatGPT CEO said, people will release intelligence like water or like electricity. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's too soon to say, right? Because again, we don't have, sometimes you need to have a big issue to figure out, right, some litigation around it and then to put those regulations in place. Will organizations be building their own large language models? Highly doubt it. Why? That is a ton of data. It is so compute and resource heavy. They're not building large language models. They will have small language models. Small language models are just as good for many of the tasks that you need. And this is that balance.
Yeah. Can I throw a use case out at you? For example, if a company says, you know what, we have, 6,000 requests for proposal because we're a global company worldwide, and we have a whole process of different steps that you have to go in to assess whether we even want the business and evaluate the business and calculate an actual proposal. A small language model would be perfect for that, to say, hey, listen, let's just upload all of our documents, all of our processes, our milestones, our stage gates. It could, a small language model should be able to filter through that and provide you without you being in danger of your information getting into the wrong hands. Is that correct?
Exactly, right, because it'll stay on-prem. The other thing that you brought up, though, was current processes and future processes are going to have to change. So right now, most organizations, most processes, if not all processes, are pre-AI processes, meaning it was very maybe, human process heavy, right? There were lots of different steps that needed to happen. This is going to have to be something that, right, process reengineering, process optimization. We are going to have to change processes, and people have to get comfortable with that.
I like that you say, because something I picked up online recently as well, which made me smile, because often you hear things that you should have been thinking because it's so obvious, but somebody has to say it for you to actually they're right. And it was a discussion on, there's this eternal conversation, is AI really intelligent? And they actually changed the conversation. This is, we're asking the wrong question. This is because our stance towards AI is the wrong one. We're taking an anthropomorphic view on AI. And if you pretend like AI is like a human, you're missing the whole point. It has a whole different structure, a whole different way to come up with results. And until we get a better understanding of that, we're doing ourselves a disservice in maximizing its potential.
Yeah, I mean, that comes down to the whole AGI, right? Discussion, and do we have artificial general intelligence, right? That's AGI. So what is AGI? It's saying, is it like a human, right? Can it do everything that a human can do? Well, the reason that we have so many different approaches to this is because we don't actually know how humans learn, right? So do we learn through reinforcement learning? Do we learn through supervised learning? Do we learn through unsupervised learning? Maybe it's a combination of all of them, right? So when people start talking about, are we at AGI? When are we going to hit AGI? Sometimes I feel like those can be very philosophical questions, but they aren't exactly helpful questions.
Question if they're useful.
Yeah, right. They're not helpful. I mean, what's the point of getting to AGI, right? Because now this is fear mongering. So now this is getting people, because there is still a lot of fears and concerns when it comes to AI. And so this just feeds into some of those fears.
I once jokingly said that if once again, I think this is this anthropomorphism that we're doing towards AI. I often said, if AI would actually think like a human being and it would be superior to us, why would it even work for us? I don't know. If I was more intelligent and somebody inferior asked me to do something, they'd have to beg and plead me. Because, I mean, if you have free choice, you would say, well, why should I bother? But that's just an off topic. There's another hot topic which you can't get away from in the AI sphere, and that is these data centers. And you hear all these horrific stories. I don't even know how many of them are true. I just recently saw one that there's 75 data centers in Tucson alone, or Phoenix. Which I'm like, that's a hot place. Why would you build a data center there? Or you've got this one Canadian guy from Shark Tank who wants to build a huge data center the size of, I don't know, Rhode Island or something in Utah. And then you hear all these terrible stories about energy consumption, water consumption, pollution, heat. I don't know, the equivalent of I don't know how many atomic bombs per day in heat, whatever that. I think it sounds kind of polemic, but that's the kind of stuff that you hear. And this is going to be a little bit outside of your primary function, but I'm sure you've been following it with interest as well. PMI, and I've had Lucila Dotto on the show as well. She's a great person just like you in America. And I love the fact that PMI has committed itself to the concept of sustainability, because I think those are one of the things that all companies kind of commit to, but a lot of them pay lip service. I think often if you look at who's responsible for ESG or CSR, it's a lawyer. And I'm like, why is it a lawyer? Or a marketing person. I'm like, even worse. And that comes from our marketing person, right? But I love the fact that PMI is always been non-political, but I'm proud of it that it takes a stance and says, you know what, sustainability is important. So these are two topics that we've got going on in AI. What's your stance on this whole energy consumption deal? Is it just a question of where we are in the technology that we're not ready to solve those problems yet? Where do you think we're going to be going with that? Because doesn't that endanger AI as well? I often feel that, maybe in 5-7 years' time, when a lot of the investors say, hey, I want my money back, I think a lot of these AI initiatives are going to be falling to the wayside, not because they're not viable functionally, but because they're not viably financially. What's your take on that?
I think that it's a wait and see, right? I mean, you don't know what 5 to 7 years is going to look like, how we're going to become more efficient and how we're going to optimize how we use the different technology. When it comes to data centers in particular, right? So again, I'll break this down into a few different parts of your question. So one was around data centers. One thing that I love about PMI is that we're a global organization. That means we have 304 chapters across the globe. We have different, regions that are represented. And I get the opportunity to travel to many of these and get to speak to people firsthand. In Europe, for example, AI sovereignty is a really hot topic right now, right? You can't have AI sovereignty unless you have your data stored physically on your soil.
Yeah, that's a hot topic in Europe. We're way behind the game there, yeah.
But you need data centers to do that. And when you think about Europe, it isn't one cohesive continent. It's many countries that make up a continent. So we are going to need that now in every single location so that your data is stored on soil. You have talent on soil, right? That is what AI sovereignty is all about. So that's one side of things, right? So now we're going, well, we want AI sovereignty and we want that for a number of different reasons. Okay, fine. You have to have data centers. You cannot get around that. Then on the other hand, we have so many data centers are being built, right? NIMBY, not in my backyard. People don't want it in their different locations, and they don't want it in their backyard. They don't want it near them. But we understand that we need it. And then there's cost implications to that as well, because we need to have these data centers. You need to fund these data centers. You need to fund the data, right? And the energy that's being used. So we have that on the other hand. At some point, these are going to equalize out and we're going to figure out, well, what does this really mean? We're going to have laws and regulations around this. So countries are going to say, okay, fine. If it's stored in this location, we feel comfortable, or in this location, we feel comfortable. Or maybe they're going to say it has to be on our soil. This is something that still needs to play out, and I have no idea where that's going to go because unfortunately, when I look at my crystal ball, it doesn't tell me. So those are the two different sides that we have to play out. When it comes to sustainability, it's funny. I never get asked this question. So you're one of the very few people that have actually
I'm a son of a gun, sorry.
And I think that this also has to do with more of your European focus. Now, yes, are other people thinking about it? Of course they are. And when you brought that up earlier in the speeches, right, from universities, how students were upset about this. Some of it is because they are upset about the impact that it has on the environment. Some of them are upset about the impact that it has on their employment, right?
Yes,
Their
that's a huge
immediate
issue.
employment. And some of them are upset about some of these large organizations, right? You know, kind of this money grab, and they don't feel good, right? They're not trusting those organizations. So there's a number of different things when it comes to that. But what I will say is that as AI scales, PMI's focus is to help organizations move from ambition to disciplined execution. So this is embedding sustainability, responsibility, governance, and measurable impact into AI initiatives from the start, rather than treating them as separate or after the fact considerations. So with CPMAI, for example, our trustworthy AI framework is embedded throughout the entire process. It is not something that you just bolt on at the end and go, oh, shoot, we got to think about trustworthy AI. Let's just add it at the end. No, it's something that you think about in every single phase. And as you're doing that, you're asking the right questions, right? You're thinking about what are the impacts of this? What are the long-term implications of this? How are we going to have, a sustainable project as well? And so I think that from that perspective, it's really important to be thinking about it holistically rather than like as one-off topics. And of course, there's going to be a lot of geopolitical issues that are impacting some of this. Things can change. Regulations that happen within countries or within regions are also going to have an impact on that. So I can't say what the long-term effects are going to be, but people are thinking about it and discussing it, which is great.
Yeah. One of the things I'm hearing between the things you're saying, and I love the things you're saying, you kind of remind me of the fact I'm a dual citizen. I'm American, but my parents were originally from Europe, and I've been living in Europe for a long time now. So I'm kind of a blend between both cultures and neither. One of the things that that kind of gives me hope in what you're saying, and I would agree with you. I think one of the true American qualities has been kind of this agile approach. It says, we don't need to have all the answers right up front. We'll deal with the issues when we come up with them. And I think that has always served our nation well in the sense of being ahead of the game and proactive. I think it stipulates, though, the willingness to reflect. You mentioned beforehand some people are using the scientific method. The scientific method means you make a hypothesis, you make an assumption, and you test the hell out of the assumption, and you listen to people when science actually speaks, which unfortunately, I'm not going to get too political now. Unfortunately, our nation is not doing so much at the moment. Generally speaking, unfortunately, I think that'll change again drastically. But then on the other hand, I think, and when you talked about data centers, yes, Europe is way behind, not only on AI data centers, but any data centers. I mean, there's two different types of data centers, what we're talking about here. And I think Europe has been in the cush position to say, you know what, somebody else will take care of it, and we'll just kind of ride on their tailcoats. That has to change. And I think Europe has kind of afforded itself the luxury of more the waterfall approach. We want to know before we pull the trigger, right? And what I'm hearing, maybe I'm just it's just popping up on my head. Maybe I'm just making it up. But what I'm here in our discourse is that it's not one or the other. It's kind of a hybrid approach. I think there's a value to being proactive and test the waters and figure things out as you go. Whereas I also think it's important to have a historical understanding of some of the basic social, economic challenges we have, and not throw reason completely out the window when we're moving forward because we have the fear of missing out. I think that's what I'm taking away from this conversation. And I think I love the fact that PMI is dealing both with the sustainability issue and the AI issue. And I think there's a potential synergy in there. I just find it interesting that sustainability has it hasn't fallen off the top 5 list, but it's kind of taken a lower ranking in the list of priorities for a lot of CEOs and board members out there, which I find a pity, but it's understandable. What are things that you look forward to in the AI? Everybody has kind of I know you don't have a crystal ball, but everybody has a certain thing in their mind that they're looking forward to in the AI evolution. Is there something in particular that you look forward to?
Yeah, I always end my podcast asking people what they believe the future of AI is in general, right? And its application to organizations and beyond, and kind of what they want to see for themselves as well. And so my answer has always been, I would like autonomous vehicles to hit mainstream so that I don't need to drive anymore. Driving's okay. I mean, I appreciate kind of getting out there, being able to do that. But then if I'm in rush hour traffic, right, if I have to drive long distances, if I'm driving late at night, I don't always like this. So I would love to just get in an autonomous vehicle, right, and be able to call it whenever I want and have it drive me wherever I want. So that is my ultimate goal, right, to be able to have autonomous vehicles drive me anywhere that I want. But then when I think about it from more of a practical lens, right, and what does this look like? I am really excited to see where agentic AI can take us, and just how AI has helped to make us more efficient and helped us with using it in different ways. But what I will say, right, and to caution, is that please still do remember I talked about perishable, durable, and enduring skills. We really have to be practicing our enduring skills more than ever when it comes to AI. Far too often people will, and I'm seeing it now, and I can spot Claude slides a mile away, and people think that they're great. Yeah, and it drives me nuts. Oh man. And I go, I know that you did not edit these slides after they were generated, right? And it drives me nuts, because what happens is that you take the bottleneck of work and you push it down to someone else. So now you're making me have to do the critical thinking on your work to then get back to you. And so I will say, use it to help you be efficient 100%. But I have always talked about this idea of augmented intelligence, where you're not replacing the human, but you're helping them do their job better. Use the slides as a starting point, but then go in and edit them. Go in and make it your own, right? You shouldn't be so reliant on AI that you no longer know how to create slides, or you no longer know how to edit them, or don't feel that you need to, right? Don't take the results of AI and at face value, iterate with it. And iterating doesn't always mean prompting back and forth until it spits out the right answer. It also means that you can apply your critical thinking, your judgment, your discernment, your subject matter expertise into the slides.
Have you? This is almost. I'm going to assume this is almost a rhetorical question. Have you and your team discussed the issue of maturity modeling for AI at all?
That was something actually in Cognilytica days, right? When we were an analyst firm, that we would do. At PMI, we don't do consulting. And so we don't do things like maturity modeling.
Less for you wanting to measure other people as a service, but as a template for other people to measure their maturity and use. Because I've actually recently done this with, I think it was with Claude. I did one with Claude and one with Chat. And it was not too bad, actually. One was for personal use and one was for organizational. And I thought it wasn't too bad, actually.
Was it a prompt that you used and you went back and forth?
It was a prompt that I used,
yeah. I actually was just reading somebody talking about doing that yesterday on LinkedIn. And I think that it's good, but I think it doesn't always share the entire picture. And so sometimes it can be very narrow, right? It can be sycophantic, right? And so it can tell you what you want it to hear. And so what she said, the lady who had the post, is say, think about your usage of AI as a scale of 1 to 10. Pick that number, put it in your head, then use this prompt and kind of iterate back and forth and say, are you using these tools to the best of the way that they're meant to be? Sometimes there's a lot of nuances to that. The tools that I have that are available to me at work versus personal are different. And so shadow AI is a real issue. I am not a proponent of shadow AI, so I don't do it myself. I will use Claude. I will use ChatGPT personally, right? Even Gemini personally, try and use all of them for different things. But Copilot is the only one that I have permission to use at work. So that is the only one that I use at work. Not everybody feels the same way that I do. That's okay. Shadow AI is a compliance, governance nightmare, right? So when I'm asking it, am I using it to the best of my ability? Is my team using it to the best of their ability? How are we being measured on that? There's also different roles. And so some roles are very client facing or very, member facing, very community facing. You have to be careful about how much you're using AI, right? Don't take that personal touch out of it. So are you using it to the best of your ability is one question. Are you using it appropriately is another question, right? Don't replace that human connection that I build with the members and chapter, leaders and chapter members and CPMAI certified folks. I mean, the community is incredibly amazing. I like talking to them, sending out, automated AI messaging and using a chatbot.
Terrible.
Right? It starts making it less
and there's been psychological studies that show, I mean, if you can identify AI art, your appreciation of it goes down, right? So there was an interesting study on that. Actually, the one, I had two maturity models share with me. One was for individual use, and I kind of liked it. I can't remember what the higher levels were because they were way beyond my reach. But it was funny because the first one, level 1, is use AI as a better Google, which I thought was hilarious but pretty honest statement. And nothing wrong with Google. Google revolutionized our world. It gave us access to tons of information, but compared to if you take that Google application and put it in AI, you're just accelerating to the nth degree. The second level was to use it as a personal assistant, which I thought was good. Use it for certain functionalities. The third, which especially for project managers, I'm a big fan of. In ChatGPT and Claude, you have that project function, where you can, or the notebook. I think it's called in Gemini. Too. What's that?
In Infinity now too.
Good. And I thought that was brilliant. I've actually had some really good success with that. And then the fourth level was creating your own what's it called? It's on the tip of my tongue. You mentioned it a couple of times. Agent, right? And I get such mixed messages. I haven't tried to make any agents, but I get such mixed messages. What's your take? Is there a safe way to use agents? I mean, I'm hoping there is because everybody's pushing them, but I'm constantly hearing people coming back with negative feedback. We started using agents and then we stopped using agents. What's your advice on agent use?
Figure out what problem you're trying to solve by bringing an agent in. And also, not all agents are created the same. So sometimes you can have a retrieval agent, which really is going out there, right? Like I have some retrieval agents that are going out and summarizing the news for me every single day, where then maybe you have other agents where they're going out and acting autonomously on your behalf.
For research, it would be awesome. Yeah.
And so there's also some pre-built agents, especially, like I said, we're a Copilot shop. There's pre-built agents that are out there that can help you, through chat, be able to create solutions. So creating forms, for example. And I've been encouraging colleagues to use that. So say, play around and maybe instead of Slido, let's try this at our next meeting. And also, there's ones that are, help me plan my day agents. And so it can go and it can look through all of your different, calendar invites and emails that are coming up and say, here you go. You can use this to help you plan your day. Or how do you, there's a ton of different ones that are out there, right? The research agent, exactly like you mentioned, which is great. And I use that one a lot, especially if I'm researching different topics where I want kind of that deep research that it's done. You can use that with pretty much any LLM at this point. So I would say start with some of the pre-built ones if you don't want to build it yourself and then the other thing that people recommend doing is comparing it, right? So have the agent do it versus just putting in a prompt and seeing what the results are.
Yeah. there's a distinct difference between the LLMs in their quality and their length and their tone and how long it takes for them to respond. It's quite amusing. And also what you have to do to shut them down. I've had that phenomenon a couple of times where they I think they bust a fuse. Actually, I wanted to bring up one more topic that you'd already mentioned. I wanted to give you an example. You'd mentioned that, I think the key to AI use is to be involved as a human being and learn not to shut your brain down and actually review the material. My son is actually studying business law, and he just won the national competition for mute court. And he was telling me about this, and he was at a disadvantage because the other team had access to the case a lot earlier than he had his team had access to it. And he said, I said, how did you win? He says, well, I read through their proposal, and I said, and the first thing I was looking at, I said, there's all sorts of mistakes in this. They did this with Claude. they had put in the wrong client in the case, and some of the conclusions were faulty, and all he had to do was point it out, and it totally frazzled them, and they kind of admitted that they had prepared the case complete with Claude, but they hadn't reviewed it. So there's nothing wrong with using an LLM to prepare your business case, your legal arguments, although you have to be careful what information you share from a legal perspective. But you should be able to review. And I guess that's also the big issue with vibe coding. I hear that over and over with vibe coding. You have to have a fairly high level of engineering understanding to even be able to assess the output, right?
Yeah. It's funny. My husband's a software engineer. And so we talk about that, right? Where I'm like, I don't have that deep technical background, right? I've been involved in the space now for a number of years, right? A decade plus. But I don't have that engineering background to have learned kind of some of those like computer science, engineering principles. And so, yes, of course, right? You can vibe code a website, you can vibe code different solutions. But what you find too is you can quickly spot what's been vibe coded and what's not. And then there's parts of it that don't function, right? Like it's a button that you can't click. Now, of course, does this happen with software developers too? Yes, of course it does, right? Move fast and break things, but they can fix it.
Right?
They
know how to fix it.
Exactly. What happens when you're not building that code? And now I know what a lot of people are doing is, right, they just regenerate the entire code base. But then it creates a new version, and it might not be, you might have liked version 7 and now you're on version 15.
I find that all AI has an issue. If you go down a path with AI and then you have to backtrack, the backtracking is sometimes an issue. It gets stuck on the direction it goes sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Debugging. I mean, I think that's something he hates debugging. And now if you have to debug AI vibe coding, sometimes it's really difficult, right? And it's absolutely impossible for someone that's not an experienced software developer.
Kathleen, you've been incredibly gracious to give us an overview of what PMI is doing. You've been incredibly gracious to share your personal thoughts on the market and what's going on. I had a blast. I hope you had a good time as well. Kind of as a closing note, you'd mentioned some of the things that are upcoming in PMI. What should people look forward to from your department at PMI? You mentioned there's a new seminar coming out for the standard. Is that correct? I think there's 4 different sessions. Is that correct? For the new AI standard?
There's a whole lot of different sessions. So projectmanagement.com has some. I know that regions within PMI are running different webinars as well. July 16th is International AI Day. So I specifically will be participating in 2 on that day. We have Study Hall that's coming out for CPM AI on July 16th as well. CPM AI has just been translated into our 10 core languages, and that recently came out. Yeah.
Did you guys use AI?
I mean, for an AI certification, we have to use AI in some parts, but you don't use straight AI, right? There's a whole process. I wasn't involved in that team. I'm sure they could give you all the ins and outs of what they do, how they use humans, right, to help with verification and validation, confirm it's correct. There's some languages that are very hard. I've learned German is one of them
Yep.
to translate.
It's actually a German saying. German is a difficult language is one of the most famous German quotes there is.
Yeah, and it's German and it's Japanese and Arabic are the three hardest for translations. So that's exciting. We have like we said, we knew our new AI standard global summit. Our main global summit is coming up in Detroit in October.
You're going to be speaking again. You just spoke with our chapter president, Dirk, right?
Yes,
not too long ago.
And actually, I will be in Austria for.
When are you coming?
November 3rd.
Are you coming to our event in November?
I am. I'm keynoting.
We'll go for a drink.
All right.
Yeah, I'm doing the fireside chat with Lee Lambert.
Oh, that'll be so great.
Yeah,
Lee's turning 80.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Oh, so happy birthday, Lee.
Happy birthday, Lee. Yeah,
big birthday.
I've had him on the podcast as well.
Yeah.
Well, Kathleen, thank you so much. I had a great time. I hope you had a good time as well. And I look forward to all the good stuff that's still coming from your department. All the best.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks for having me.